Death is one of the most universal yet deeply personal experiences we will all face. Despite its inevitability, many of us spend much of our lives avoiding the thought of it. The mere mention of death can trigger an overwhelming sense of fear and anxiety. This fear, known as thanatophobia, is a natural human response after all. Death represents the unknown, the end of consciousness, and the potential loss of everything we hold dear. But what if there was a way to confront this fear, to transform it into a positive force that can empower us to live fully and with greater purpose? This video is designed to guide you through a journey of understanding and acceptance. By shifting your mindset, you can learn to embrace mortality and even find beauty in the cycle of life and death. We will explore a variety of perspectives, from psychological theories to spiritual teachings, and give you practical tools for overcoming the fear of death. Ultimately, we'll show how this fear can be transformed into a powerful motivator for living a meaningful life. Why do we fear death? Before we dive into overcoming the fear of death, it's important to understand where this fear comes from. There are several reasons why death can seem so frightening, and they are often deeply rooted in both our biology and our culture. Evolutionary roots of death anxiety. From an evolutionary perspective, fear of death makes sense. Our ancestors needed to survive in a world full of dangers, predators, natural disasters, diseases. The fear of death kept them alert, cautious, and ultimately, alive. While modern society has mitigated many of these dangers, the fear remains hardwired into our biology. It's a survival mechanism that has helped the human race thrive. Cultural and societal influences. Society plays a significant role in shaping our attitudes toward death. In many cultures, death is portrayed as something to be feared and avoided. Media bombards us with images of violent deaths, horror films that make death seem grotesque, and messages that equate aging with decline. We see youth and vitality celebrated, while aging and death are pushed aside. This cultural narrative reinforces the idea that death is a negative, fearsome experience. Fear of the unknown. Perhaps the most profound reason for the fear of death is the mystery that surrounds it. What happens after we die? Do we cease to exist? Is there an afterlife or reincarnation, or something else entirely? The uncertainty of what lies beyond is unsettling. Human beings are hardwired to seek control and certainty, and death represents the ultimate unknown. Existential concerns. Death forces us to confront existential questions. What is the meaning of life? What is our purpose? If death is the end, then what does it mean to live? These are heavy, often uncomfortable questions, and they can trigger a deep sense of dread. Fear of loss and pain. Many of us fear not only our own death, but the pain and suffering that might accompany it. We fear the idea of leaving behind loved ones, the potential for a painful or prolonged death, and the grief that our passing will cause to those we care about. Psychological theories on death anxiety. There are many psychological theories that attempt to explain why we fear death, and understanding them can help us to better address and manage this fear. Sigmund Freud's concept of denial. Freud, one of the most famous figures in psychology, believed that humans cannot truly comprehend their own death. The unconscious mind, he argued, refuses to acknowledge the possibility of non-existence. Therefore, we repress our fear of death, which can manifest in other forms of anxiety or neuroses. Freud's work suggests that facing the reality of death head-on is crucial for overcoming death anxiety. Terror management theory. Terror management theory, TMT, developed by psychologists Sheldon Solomon, Jeff Greenberg, and Tom Pyszczynski, suggests that much of human behavior is motivated by the fear of death. According to TMT, people develop cultural worldviews and seek self-esteem as a way to manage this fear. By believing in something greater than ourselves, whether it be religion, national identity, or personal legacy, we can transcend the fear of death and find meaning. Existential psychology. Existential psychology, particularly the work of Viktor Frankl and Irvin Yalom, focuses on how people can find meaning in life in the face of mortality. Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychologist, argued that even in the most difficult circumstances, humans can choose their response to life's challenges, including death. He believed that finding meaning in suffering was the key to overcoming existential fear. Yalom, on the other hand, emphasized the importance of living authentically and accepting the reality of death as a way to reduce death anxiety. The positive spin, embracing mortality. Now that we understand the roots of the fear of death, let's explore how we can turn this fear into something positive. By changing our perspective on death, we can not only reduce our anxiety, but also enhance our appreciation for life. Mindset shift. Death as a motivator for living fully. One of the most powerful ways to overcome the fear of death is to see it as a motivator for living a purposeful and meaningful life. When we truly internalize the fact that our time on earth is limited, it can inspire us to make the most of every moment. Instead of fearing death, we can use it as a reminder to focus on what truly matters: our relationships, our passions, our personal growth. Death as a natural cycle. Many spiritual and philosophical traditions teach that death is not an end, but a part of the natural cycle of life. In nature, death and rebirth are constant processes. Plants wither and decay, only to nourish new life. Animals die, but their bodies provide sustenance for others. By seeing ourselves as part of this larger cycle, we can come to accept death as a natural and essential part of life. Spiritual and philosophical perspectives. Throughout history, different cultures and spiritual traditions have offered various perspectives on death. Many of these teachings frame death not as something to be feared, but as a transition or transformation. For example, Buddhism teaches that death is a natural part of the cycle of samsara, rebirth, and that by understanding the impermanence of life, we can reduce our attachment to the physical world and overcome suffering. Hinduism holds that the soul, Atman, is eternal and undergoes reincarnation until it attains moksha, liberation. For Hindus, death is not an end, but a step on the path towards spiritual enlightenment. Stoic philosophy emphasizes the importance of accepting death as inevitable and focusing on living a virtuous life. Stoic thinkers like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca believed that by preparing for death and meditating on its inevitability, we can free ourselves from fear and anxiety. How different cultures celebrate life through death. In some cultures, death is not something to be feared but celebrated. For example, Mexico's Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, is a joyful celebration of life and death, where families honor their deceased loved ones by building altars, offering food and flowers, and remembering the good times they shared. Tibetan sky burials are a practice where the bodies of the deceased are offered to vultures, symbolizing the impermanence of the physical body and the cycle of life. This practice is seen as a way to give back to nature and continue the cycle of life. The benefits of accepting death. Once we begin to embrace death as a natural and inevitable part of life, we can experience a range of positive benefits. Living a purposeful life. Knowing that life is finite can clarify our sense of purpose. It encourages us to set meaningful goals, to focus on what truly matters, and to live each day with intention. When we stop worrying about how much time we have left and instead focus on making the most of the time we have, we can live more fully. Improved relationships. When we accept death, we also become more aware of the preciousness of our relationships. We recognize that our time with loved ones is limited, and this can inspire us to deepen our connections, to express our love more freely, and to appreciate the moments we share. Techniques to overcome the fear of death. Now that we've laid the groundwork for understanding the fear of death and how it can be reframed into something positive, let's dive into specific techniques and practices that can help you overcome this fear. These methods range from mindfulness practices and philosophical reflections to therapeutic approaches and spiritual exercises. 1. Meditation and mindfulness practices. Meditation and mindfulness practices have been proven to reduce anxiety, stress, and fear. They help cultivate a deeper understanding of the present moment and a sense of peace with what is, rather than dwelling on the uncertainties of the future, including death. Meditation on impermanence, memento mori. The Stoic practice of memento mori, or remember you must die, is an ancient technique to remind oneself that death is inevitable and a natural part of life. This may sound morbid, but reflecting on the transient nature of life can actually be liberating. It brings clarity to what matters in the present and helps eliminate fear by fostering acceptance. Practice. Sit quietly for 10-15 minutes each day and meditate on the fact that life is temporary. You can focus on your breath, envisioning it as a symbol of life's fleeting nature. Contemplate the fact that every breath brings you closer to the end, but instead of fear, let it fill you with a sense of gratitude for the life you are currently living. Mindfulness meditation. Mindfulness is the practice of staying present in the moment. By being fully engaged in the present, you can reduce the fear of what's to come. Many fears surrounding death are about the unknown future, but mindfulness helps bring you back to the now, where death isn't happening and life is unfolding. Practice. Take 5 to 10 minutes each day to focus on the present moment. Pay attention to your surroundings, your sensations, your thoughts, and your emotions without judgment. Whenever your mind wanders to thoughts of death, gently bring it back to the present. This practice helps train the mind to stop catastrophizing and focus on what you can control. 2. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is a highly effective approach in treating anxiety, including death anxiety. CBT helps individuals identify negative thought patterns and replace them with healthier, more balanced thoughts. Reframing thoughts about death. Many people fear death because they associate it with loss, pain, or the end of everything they love. CBT encourages reframing these negative associations into more positive or neutral ones. For example, instead of thinking of death as the end, you might reframe it as a transition or as a natural conclusion to a well-lived life. Practice. When you feel overwhelmed by the fear of death, write down your thoughts. Identify any irrational or exaggerated fears, e.g., I'll lose everything, or death is terrifying. Challenge these thoughts by asking yourself questions like, is this fear based on facts, or is it an assumption? Then, create a more balanced thought, e.g., death is a natural part of life, or I can't control death, but I can control how I live. 3. Stoic philosophy and the acceptance of death. Stoic philosophy, particularly the teachings of figures like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, offers valuable insights into overcoming the fear of death. Stoicism teaches that death is not inherently good or bad. It's simply a fact of existence. The Stoics believe that by accepting death and preparing for it, we can free ourselves from unnecessary anxiety. Contemplating death daily. The Stoics advocated contemplating death regularly, not to create anxiety, but to remove its power. They believed that by facing death directly, we can develop the mental fortitude to live without fear. Practice. Each day, take a few moments to reflect on the fact that you will die, and so will everyone you know. Ask yourself, if today were my last day, how would I live differently? This practice helps shift focus from fearing death to valuing life. Focusing on what you can control. One of the central tenets of Stoicism is the idea that we should focus on what we can control and accept what we cannot. Death is something we cannot control, so fearing it only wastes energy. Instead, focus on living a virtuous life and making the most of the time you have. Practice. Each time you feel anxious about death, remind yourself of the Stoic principle. I can't control when or how I die, but I can control how I live today. This shift in focus helps reduce anxiety and fosters a sense of empowerment. 4. Spiritual and religious practices. Many people turn to spiritual or religious practices to cope with the fear of death. Different belief systems offer various perspectives on death, from seeing it as a transition to another realm, such as the afterlife or reincarnation, to viewing it as a reunion with a higher power. Exploring afterlife beliefs. If you belong to a religion that teaches about the afterlife, spending time reflecting on these teachings can bring comfort. Christianity, for example, offers the promise of eternal life in heaven, while Hinduism and Buddhism teach reincarnation and the possibility of spiritual enlightenment beyond death. Practice. Spend time reading sacred texts or listening to spiritual teachings about death. Reflect on what resonates with you and how these beliefs can bring peace to your mind. Near-death experiences, NDEs. Some individuals who have had near-death experiences describe a sense of peace, love, and acceptance during their moments of clinical death. Reading or watching documentaries about NDEs can offer a comforting perspective on what might await after life. Practice. Explore books or videos about near-death experiences and reflect on the consistent themes of peace and acceptance reported by those who have experienced them. Use these stories as a reminder that death may not be as terrifying as it seems. 5. Accepting mortality through connection with nature. Nature provides powerful reminders that death is a natural and necessary part of life. By observing the cycles of life, death, and rebirth in nature, we can come to see our own mortality in a more peaceful and accepting way. Death is part of the cycle of life. Just as the seasons change, animals and plants die and are reborn in new forms, humans are part of this grand cycle of life. Connecting with nature can remind us that we, too, are part of something much larger than ourselves. Practice. Spend time in nature, observing the cycles of life and death around you. Whether it's leaves falling from a tree or the death of a flower in winter, let nature remind you that death is not an end but a transformation. Embrace the beauty in impermanence, the legacy of contribution. Just as nature continually renews itself, so can we contribute something that lives on beyond our death. Whether it's the impact we have on others, the work we create, or the memories we leave behind, our legacy can continue to grow even after we are gone. Practice. Consider what kind of legacy you want to leave behind. Write down the ways in which you want to impact the world and others. Focus on living each day in alignment with this legacy, using mortality to live fully. One of the greatest gifts of accepting death is the clarity and focus it brings to life. When we stop fearing death, we can start living with purpose, intention, and joy. Here are some practical ways to use the awareness of mortality to enrich your life. Firstly, setting meaningful goals. When you acknowledge that life is finite, it becomes easier to focus on what truly matters. Rather than getting bogged down in trivial concerns, you can set goals that align with your deepest values. Clarifying what matters most. Reflect on what is most important to you. Is it your relationships, your health, your personal growth, or your contributions to the world? Once you have clarity on your values, set goals that reflect those priorities. Practice. Write down your top 5 life goals. Ask yourself, if I had only 1 year left to live, what would I want to accomplish? Use this sense of urgency to motivate you to pursue your dreams. Second, embracing adventure and risk. Many people avoid taking risks or trying new things because they fear failure, rejection, or uncertainty. However, when you accept that death is inevitable, the fear of failure starts to fade in comparison. Embracing life's adventures becomes more appealing when you realize you have nothing to lose. Living fearlessly. Use your awareness of mortality to push yourself outside of your comfort zone. Whether it's pursuing a new passion, traveling to unfamiliar places, or starting a new relationship, remember that life is short, and it's worth living to the fullest. Practice. Challenge yourself to do something you've always wanted to try but have been afraid to pursue. It could be as simple as speaking your mind in a difficult conversation, or as bold as starting a new business venture. Let the knowledge of life's impermanence fuel your courage. Third, creating a legacy. One of the most comforting ways to deal with the fear of death is to focus on the legacy you'll leave behind. While our physical bodies may perish, the impact we have on others, through our kindness, creativity, and contributions, can live on for generations. Building your legacy. Think about the ways in which you want to be remembered. Do you want to be known for your compassion, your contributions to society, or your creative works? Start taking steps to build that legacy now. Practice. Write down the values and qualities you want to pass on to future generations. Consider how you can embody those values each day, whether it's through your work, your relationships, or your personal growth. Real-life examples of overcoming the fear of death. Learning from others who have faced death with courage and acceptance can be incredibly inspiring. Here are some real-life stories of individuals who have overcome their fear of death and lived extraordinary lives. First person is Viktor Frankl, finding meaning in suffering. Viktor Frankl, a renowned psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, developed a form of therapy known as logotherapy, which emphasizes the search for meaning as the primary driver of human life. Despite enduring unimaginable suffering in Nazi concentration camps, Frankl found meaning in his suffering and used this as a way to overcome his fear of death. Key lesson. Frankl believed that even in the face of death, humans can find meaning and purpose. His philosophy teaches that by focusing on what we can control, our response to life's challenges, we can transcend fear and live fully, even in the face of mortality. Second person is Steve Jobs, living with death as a motivator. Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple, often spoke about how the awareness of his own mortality shaped his approach to life and work. Diagnosed with terminal cancer, Jobs gave a famous commencement speech at Stanford University in which he said, "Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart." Key lesson. Jobs used his fear of death as motivation to live boldly and take risks. His awareness of death pushed him to pursue his passions and leave an indelible mark on the world. Terminal illness and peaceful acceptance. Many people who have been diagnosed with terminal illnesses report finding a sense of peace and acceptance in the face of death. Some describe how the awareness of their limited time brought them a sense of clarity, allowing them to focus on what truly mattered: love, relationships, and personal growth. Key lesson. Facing death directly can lead to a peaceful acceptance and a deeper appreciation for life. Those who have confronted their mortality often report living more authentically and joyfully in their final days. The role of religion and spirituality in easing the fear of death. Religion and spirituality have long offered comfort and guidance for those grappling with the fear of death. Whether through beliefs in an afterlife, reincarnation, or the idea of a higher purpose, many religious traditions provide a framework for understanding and accepting death. 1. Christianity, the promise of eternal life. In Christianity, death is seen not as an end but as a transition to eternal life with God. For Christians, the belief in the resurrection of Jesus offers hope that death is not final, and that those who have faith will experience eternal life in heaven. Key lesson. The Christian belief in eternal life offers comfort to those who fear death, reminding them that death is not the end, but the beginning of a new existence with God. 2. Buddhism and reincarnation. Buddhism teaches that life is a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, samsara, and that by attaining enlightenment, one can break free from this cycle and achieve nirvana. Death is seen as a natural part of this cycle, and Buddhists are encouraged to meditate on the impermanence of life to overcome attachment and fear. Key lesson. By accepting the impermanence of life and focusing on spiritual growth, Buddhists can reduce their fear of death and embrace it as part of the journey toward enlightenment. 3. Hinduism, the soul's eternal journey. In Hinduism, the soul, Atman, is believed to be eternal and undergoes a cycle of reincarnation until it achieves moksha, liberation. For Hindus, death is not something to be feared, but a step on the path towards spiritual growth and eventual liberation from the cycle of life and death. Key lesson. The belief in reincarnation offers a sense of continuity beyond death, allowing individuals to see death as a part of their soul's eternal journey toward enlightenment. The science of death and afterlife. In addition to spiritual beliefs, there is growing scientific interest in the nature of death and what, if anything, happens after we die. While much remains unknown, advances in neuroscience, psychology, and consciousness studies are shedding new light on the mysteries of death and the afterlife. Near-death experiences, NDEs. Near-death experiences, NDEs, are reported by individuals who have been close to death or temporarily clinically dead. These experiences often involve feelings of peace, encounters with deceased loved ones, and a sense of leaving the body and entering another realm. While the scientific community is divided on the nature of NDEs, many researchers believe they offer insight into what happens after death. Key lesson: NDEs provide a glimpse into the possibility that consciousness may continue after death. For those who fear the unknown, these experiences offer hope that death is not the end, but a transition to another state of existence. Consciousness and the brain. Neuroscientists are studying the relationship between consciousness and the brain to better understand what happens during death. While traditional science holds that consciousness is a product of brain activity, some researchers are exploring the idea that consciousness may exist independently of the brain and continue after death. Key lesson: the study of consciousness raises profound questions about the nature of life and death. While much remains unknown, the possibility that consciousness may persist beyond the physical body offers hope to those who fear death. Dealing with the death of loved ones. One of the most difficult aspects of death is not our own mortality, but the loss of loved ones. The fear of losing those we care about can be overwhelming, but there are ways to cope with grief and find peace in the face of loss. 1. Grieving with love and acceptance. Grief is a natural response to loss, and it's important to allow yourself to feel the full range of emotions that come with it: sadness, anger, confusion, and even relief. By embracing grief rather than avoiding it, you can eventually come to a place of acceptance. Key lesson: grieving the loss of a loved one is a process, but by allowing yourself to feel the pain and eventually accepting the reality of death, you can find peace and continue to honor the memory of those you've lost. 2. Keeping the memory of loved ones alive. While the physical presence of a loved one may be gone, their spirit and influence can live on in your life. Whether through stories, traditions, or shared memories, you can keep the legacy of those you've lost alive in meaningful ways. Key lesson: honoring the memory of a loved one can help you cope with the pain of their absence. By focusing on the love and joy they brought into your life, you can keep their spirit alive. Leaving a legacy, making your life count. One of the most powerful ways to overcome the fear of death is to focus on the legacy you'll leave behind. While your physical body may perish, the impact you have on the world, through your actions, your relationships, and your contributions, can live on long after you're gone. Building a lasting legacy. Consider what kind of impact you want to have on the world. Do you want to be remembered for your kindness, your creativity, or your contributions to society? Start taking steps now to build the legacy you want to leave behind. Key lesson: by focusing on building a legacy, you can live with purpose and intention, knowing that your life will continue to have meaning even after you're gone. Sharing wisdom and stories. One of the most meaningful ways to leave a legacy is by sharing your wisdom and stories with others. Whether it's writing a memoir, recording videos, or simply having conversations with loved ones, passing on your experiences and insights can have a lasting impact. Key lesson: sharing your wisdom with future generations ensures that your life lessons and experiences will continue to benefit others, even after you're gone. Actionable steps for overcoming fear of death. Now that we've explored a wide range of perspectives, techniques, and examples, let's summarize some actionable steps you can take to overcome your fear of death and live a more meaningful life. 1. Develop a daily practice of gratitude and mindfulness. Gratitude and mindfulness can help you focus on the present moment and appreciate the life you have, rather than worrying about the future. Practice. Start a gratitude journal and write down 3 things you're grateful for each day. Spend a few minutes each day practicing mindfulness, focusing on your breath and the present moment. 2. Engage in conversations about death with loved ones. Talking openly about death can reduce fear and anxiety, both for yourself and your loved ones. Practice. Initiate a conversation with a close friend or family member about death. Share your thoughts and fears, and listen to theirs. By opening up this dialogue, you can start to normalize the topic of death and reduce its emotional charge. 3. Seek therapy or counseling if death anxiety becomes overwhelming. If your fear of death is interfering with your daily life, consider seeking professional help. A therapist can help you explore your fears and develop coping strategies. Practice. Find a therapist who specializes in anxiety or existential concerns. Consider exploring different types of therapy, such as CBT, existential therapy, or grief counseling. 4. Volunteer in hospice care to understand death from a grounded perspective. Volunteering in hospice care can give you a new perspective on death by allowing you to witness the peaceful acceptance many people experience in their final moments. Practice. Look for volunteer opportunities at local hospice organizations. By being present with those at the end of life, you can gain a deeper understanding of death and develop a sense of peace with it. 5. Explore spiritual or religious teachings to find peace. Many spiritual and religious traditions offer comforting perspectives on death and the afterlife. Explore different teachings to see what resonates with you. Practice. Attend religious services, read spiritual texts, or explore online resources related to death and the afterlife. Find a belief system or philosophy that brings you comfort and peace. Embracing life through the lens of mortality. One of the greatest gifts of overcoming the fear of death is the clarity and focus it brings to life. When you stop fearing death, you can start living with purpose, intention, and joy. Carpe diem. Seizing the day. Use the awareness of your mortality to motivate you to seize each day and make the most of every moment. Practice. Each morning, remind yourself that today is a gift. Ask yourself, what can I do today to live fully? Whether it's pursuing a passion, spending time with loved ones, or simply enjoying the present moment, focus on living intentionally. The power of impermanence. Embrace the beauty of impermanence. Just as flowers bloom and wither, and the seasons change, life is constantly evolving. By accepting that everything is temporary, you can appreciate the beauty and joy of each moment. Practice. Take time to notice the impermanence of the world around you, whether it's the changing leaves in the fall or the fleeting moments of joy in your day. Let the awareness of impermanence deepen your appreciation for life's beauty. Conclusion for a life lived without fear. By embracing mortality and shifting your perspective on death, you can transform your fear into a powerful motivator for living a meaningful and joyful life. Death is inevitable, but it doesn't have to be something you fear. Instead, it can be a reminder to live fully, love deeply, and make every moment count. If this video has helped you shift your perspective on death and inspired you to live more fully, don't forget to subscribe, turn on notification bell, like, share, comments to our channel for more content that empowers personal growth and well-being. Share this video with someone who may be struggling with the fear of death, and let's help each other live life without fear. Remember, life is precious. Embrace it with gratitude, courage, and love.